Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our session today on using UCMDB to support data center transformations. Today we're going to be talking about some of the different ways in which UCMDB can lend itself for reporting and analytics critical to any kind of major data center operation. Firstly, we'll do some introductions. My name is Anu Rao. I've spent a few years working with Configure Consulting, focused on helping organizations implement solutions around config management, change management, as well as other aspects of IT operations. Presenting with me today is Mark Harper from the Configure Consulting team. Mark, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nu. Hi, my name is Mark Harper. I'm a member of the Configure Consulting team. I've been working for the company for a number of years now, and throughout that time, I've taken part in some data center transformations and migrations, and we use the UCMDB tool to effectively plan and architect that move.
Great, thanks, Mark. So we just want to do some webinar guidelines before we get started. The webinar is being recorded today, and all lines are currently muted. We'd ask that you not put your phone on hold or answer another call while you're in the session, as your hold music may play to the group on the call here. Throughout the presentation, feel free to post any questions you may have to the question manager on the right-hand side of the screen. What we'll do is at the end of the session, we'll cover all the questions that have been posted. Before we get into the agenda here, I just want to take a second to provide a quick overview on Configure Consulting. Configure has got a lot of experience helping empower organizations with efficiency, stability, and top performance in the delivery of business services. We do this through our primary practice areas that are on the right-hand side of the screen here. One of those is config and change management, and that's the area that we'll be focusing on for today's discussion. And now onto the agenda. Today we're going to start by doing an overview of exactly what is a data center transformation. We'll then discuss some of the key questions that are almost always asked internally during a transformation event. And in our experience, we've found that the answers to quite a few of these mission-critical questions lie in the CMS, or Configuration Management System. We'll talk about how the UCMDB solution, as well as Configure Consulting's tactical approach, works really well together in terms of extracting value out of the CMS and providing key analytics for the data center move. Mark will be going through, in the tactical approach section, a case study of how another organization used this combination to support their initiative. And he'll also be showcasing the UCMDB Browser, and in particular, the way it really helps support collaboration between different teams. Finally, at the end of the presentation, we'll discuss some key considerations, takeaways, as well as doing our question and answer session. So before we move forward, I just want to take a quick show of hands with the audience here on the call today. Can you raise your hand if you're familiar with the HP UCMDB at all? You can do that just by clicking on the hand icon on the right-hand side of your screen. Yeah, so I'm seeing quite a few of the hands go up in the room, and we'll keep that in mind as we go through our presentation and we go through different terminologies. It's good to know we've got a lot of experienced folks on the call today. So to get started, what is a data center transformation? Certainly, there are numerous definitions out there, but our concept today is quite simple. Really, it's any significant change within the data center environment that may have an impact on IT operations. This includes, but certainly is by no means limited to, the initiatives that you see kind of highlighted on the left-hand side of the screen. So large-scale modernization, can include application upgrades, hardware refreshes, etc. Consolidation exercises are quite common and commonly tied in with the following two bullets, which are virtualization as well as transitions to cloud or hybrid environments. Physical relocations, so data center moves, are probably the most commonly seen version of the data center transformation. Actually, physical relocation is what we'll be discussing in our case study today. And finally, but quite importantly, building or testing DR sites in terms of data center transformations are also pretty commonly seen. And you'll notice that a lot of the reporting and a lot of the analytics do address a lot of the requirements of that transformation very well as well. So a lot of the initiatives, listed on the previous screen were quite different in nature, but having worked with hundreds of organizations in this area, we found that across the board, a lot of the same questions are being asked. Primarily, before any kind of transformation, organizations are trying to wrap their arms around the scope of the change. So how large is it? What is the breakdown of the affected infrastructure or CIs? What parts of the environment might get affected by the change, whether directly or indirectly? And also, how will we know if we were successful with our change? Those three broad questions are kind of broken out into sub-bullets or details on this slide here. Some of these questions really do have make or break impacts on a data center transformation. Take currency versions, for example. Failure to identify and plan around out-of-date or out-of-support systems can significantly delay or could have a show-stopping effect on the game plan for a transformation. Often a large-scale change, like a relocation or virtualization initiatives, are taken as a time to kind of realign standards and ensure that infrastructure are up to date. So it is important to understand the breakdown of infrastructure that is within the scope. Similarly, it's imperative to have a hold on the critical dependencies between elements of the infrastructure. And that on the day that I physically relocate, impact on these 20 servers then have been mapped up to these 5 business services, and let's plan around that. Sometimes organizations take a best guess at this level of impact, relying on tribal knowledge, internal records, or even anecdotal examples of how things have failed or things have been slowed down in the past. Increasingly though, we're finding organizations are turning to the UCMDB as well as other configuration management databases for discovering and mapping out a lot of these critical relationships. And that's something we'll cover as we move through the presentation some more. And finally, organizations are consistently looking for efficiency gains in infrastructure tools and processes. So sometimes a lot of these breakdown analytics can help us identify opportunities for virtualization and help us consolidate or streamline underutilized infrastructure. So these are some of the key questions that are asked quite often during a data center transformation, but importantly, that should be asked during the course of day-to-day business if we're trying to have good visibility and operate in a way that is as efficient as possible. So moving to this next slide here, I'd like to talk about how our team here at Configure Consulting has found a lot of the answers lie in configuration management systems. We'll be showcasing the HP UCMDB today. This is a best-of-breed solution set in this area, and it's got 3 primary functional areas as highlighted on the screen. So starting from the base layer, first step is discovery. So working with the Universal Discovery tool, we're able to capture critical configuration items data, including attributes, relationships, and change history. This discovered information often gets augmented with in-house repositories of relevant data. This can be things like CI owners, application status, criticality, or what have you. This combined data kind of sets the foundation of the solution, and this foundational element is then modeled within the UCMDB. It's modeled into functional groups. Those functional groups can be business services, applications, business units, locations, etc. And this universe then of modeled data within the UCMDB is what we use to do our reporting and analytics. There's three primary engines for reporting within the solution set. There is the reporting module within the UCMDB, where there's a host of pretty powerful and easy to use out-of-the-box reports. There is the HP Configuration Manager. This is an effective tool for managing policies and compliance. So things like detecting and enforcing baseline config standards. Comparing topological views can be done really effectively in the Configuration Manager. And finally, the third engine that we'd like to discuss is the UCMDB Browser. The UCMDB Browser really promotes collaboration because it does have intuitive search and navigation capability. And so it lends itself nicely to use by different teams across the organization. And you're going to see Mark showcase the browser in his demonstration. And I think what you'll notice is that there's a lot, the use cases that Mark's going to discuss are quite different from the traditional use cases of just look up an asset, look at the relationship, view impact, etc. You'll see how the browser can really work to replace a lot of the traditional Excel sheets or redundant collaboration features that can kind of get messy to keep track of. These are the three primary elements. And we've found that through working with hundreds of organizations around data center moves, there is a tactical approach to optimizing the use of these. And at this time, I will pass it over to Mark to kind of run through what Configure Consulting's tactical approach here is.
All right, thank you, Nu, for that presentation. So in this portion of the presentation, we're going to take a look at a case study that we're actively part of as part of Configure Consulting. And we're going to look at the approach that we took to successfully move them from one physical data center to another. So we all know that migrating a data center can be overwhelming. It's a huge challenge that requires many hours of analysis and planning in order to mitigate the risk. And some people may ask, why go through that effort? And we covered a couple early on in this in the presentation, but a lot of the key aspects of migrating a data center can be down to reducing costs, and the new site may be a lot cheaper and more efficient to run the site. It could be environmental drivers. You could be in an area of the country that's susceptible for hurricanes or tornadoes. You may have expanded your business. You may have acquired a new business and you're looking to bring all of their assets into one location. Or you may have simply just exceeded the space available in your existing data center, so you can no longer grow or add any servers to that existing site. So there's all kinds of different factors in place that many organizations may look to. With our case study, we were working with a large financial institution, and they weren't really comfortable with the location of their data center. They felt it was at risk for storms that could pass through, and their business had grown to the point where they couldn't really fit that much more room or any more servers in their data center. They had supported the floors and reinforced the areas as much as they could do, but all of the short-term patches were starting to show their cracks. It was time for them to move out. So they tried to do it by themselves to begin with. The planning and the taking all of their inventory and putting it into different groups and buckets, but they really did struggle without the help of tools such as the UCMDB. So at this data center, we had roughly 1,500 servers and 500 applications. And like any organization, you don't have a one-for-one relationship between a server and an application. A database or a web server could be shared amongst 10, 20, 30, even 40 plus applications. You're going to have a large makeup of physical servers to virtual servers. And one thing that we certainly identified from day one was they simply didn't know what they didn't know. They had a manually kept repository in their service desk of all of the servers that they believed to be hosted within their data center, but nobody could say with any honesty how accurate that data was. And the more extracts that they got from their service desk, the more people that started analyzing that data, they ended up with 10 to 15 different spreadsheets created by different people, and they found that trying to create move groups this way was entirely inefficient and was very risky because there's a great chance of something being left behind. So this was a perfect use case for us to arrive with UCMDB and Universal Discovery and be able to identify everything that is located within that target data center. So with that said, we're going to move on and take a look at what our approach is when it comes to doing data center migration. So we have this cycle here of assess, plan, execute, audit, and operate. So in the assessment period, this is essentially us setting up the Universal Discovery, identifying their network ranges, and performing discovery across the entire data center. We want to try and get a complete and accurate picture of all of their servers, but not just the servers in a static list. We want to see server-to-server communications. We really need to understand those dependencies in order to carve out and create our move groups accurately and lower the risk as much as possible. The data that's returned from UCMDB and Universal Discovery is fantastic, but there's certain things that it can't simply pull back without us manually entering it or enter it from an external repository. This could be names of application owners, contact details. It could be their tiering of applications, whether it's gold, silver, bronze, or tier 1. So what we did during this period was we merged the discovered data with the manually collected data. So it's all stored in one central database, and we can use this now as our source of truth moving forward throughout the migration. So I mentioned at the beginning that they originally tried their approach using their service desk and the data that was within there. By the time we completed our discovery, it was between 20 and 25% of what we pulled back was not included in their initial reports. So there was a lot of missing information that they simply didn't know existed. Now we were able to decommission a large portion of these servers. They should have been decommissioned potentially years ago, but they had been just running blindly, nobody operating it for quite some time. And it wasn't until we brought it to their attention that we were able to effectively decommission a good portion of these servers. Our next phase was planning out the migration. We had a tremendous wealth of information now within our database regarding the servers and the server-to-server dependencies, the server-to-database relationships, everything stored within our database. But what we needed to do is we needed to tie that discovered infrastructure to the different business entities that exist within the organization. Now I saw a number of people raise their hands to say that they have previous experience with UCMDB, and if you're still working within that organization, you may have already gone through the application mapping effort. If you have a mature UCMDB, that's likely to already have taken place. For those that may have not, essentially what we're doing is we take all of your application names and we query our discovered data to align the servers that are truly dependent, or the applications that are dependent on certain servers, to those applications. This effort allowed us to not only see server-to-server dependencies, but we could see the communications going on between the different applications through the servers themselves. And this was absolutely crucial when we came around to developing our move groups and our move events. So the terms move group and move event, what we use throughout the migration You may have other people may use a wave group or wave event. Essentially what it is just grouping together servers and applications into one move group, and then the move event is the date that move group will move in. So a move event can be made up of multiple move groups, and a move group can be made up of multiple applications and servers. So our goal is to try and design the move groups to be as small as possible. The smaller the move group, the easier it is to control, the easier it is to manage, and it lowers the risk of the migration. So I talked and said that we had 1,500 servers within this organization, this data center. It would have been impossible for us to attempt to move all 1,500 on one weekend. As great as that would be to have a complete success, the risk was just far too high, and you couldn't afford to have your business completely shut off for that duration of time. So we had to schedule these move events around the business, when certain applications had to be online, when they were used most, and schedule them around potentially 3-day weekends as well. If the move group was so large that we didn't feel comfortable doing it in just a regular weekend, then we had to schedule them on 3-day weekends, or even potentially 4-day weekends if it was Thanksgiving. So the takeaway is the smaller the move group, the lower the risk. And using the UCMDB, we saw the dependencies in place. So we can view those dependencies and circle off these move groups away from the rest of the pack. And essentially what we're calling that is taking these large continents of dependencies and breaking them apart into smaller islands, which become our move groups. So when it comes to executing the move, a move doesn't happen all at once. Like we mentioned, we have these move events that are scheduled to go, and the difference between the first move event in time to the final move event could be 6 months to a year. And we all know that no environment is going to stay static and remain still throughout that duration. You may put change freezes in place, but we do know that exceptions can and will occur. So we need to adapt to those changes. So we continue to perform our discovery, we continue to look for changes in the environment, and we do change any of the move groups up if the business changes its need for those applications at that certain time. What we also do is part of the planning and the executing phase is we aim to break up some of the heavily dependent servers. So if you have a large physical web server, for instance, that's hosting 50 to 60 applications, you may look to break that physical server up, virtualize it into many different servers so that one can be used for each business unit. And it really does break down the dependencies in place, and it makes it a lot easier for us to perform the migration. It also makes it easier for your team to manage those servers rather than just the one physical server. That if it was to go down, it could introduce risk into all the applications that's going on. So the execution could take a long period of time, but we continue to review those changes and adapt our move groups where necessary. Step 4 is auditing the data that we've got coming back. And what we did was from day one is we set up a new discovery probe within the target data center, and we're actively discovering for any servers that came online. So even with the first and early move event, we saw those servers come online, and what we're able to do is do a comparison of the configuration of that server in the new data center compared to how it was built in the previous data center. So if there was any sort of issues with the performance of an application, we could review the configuration to try and identify any change that may have happened. Even though they're quite slim, it's still quite possible for that person to accidentally deploy it with the wrong size memory or do Windows 2008 rather than 2008 R2. We try to our best to mitigate these possibilities, but they still can happen. One other thing that we have to look out for as well is ensuring that nothing was left behind from that move event. Everything that was scheduled to move at that time should be moved over to the target data center. And if it doesn't come over, we need to understand why that is the case. Some of the situations could be that the data transfer from virtual machine to virtual machine errored out during the process, and that application or server now has to fall back to the previous data center and has to be rescheduled with a later move event. When it came to the end of the migration, once the final move event took place, we continued to discover the previous data center to make sure that everything that was left behind was supposed to be left behind. Once those lights go out in that data center, we don't want to have any surprises when all of a sudden an application no longer is communicating with its database because that database was left behind. So we made sure that everything that was still remaining was on the decommission list. And finally, the fifth step as part of our process is continuing to operate. So what lessons do we learn from performing the migration? And that could be application to application dependencies that you weren't always aware of before. And that can often happen in an organization where it depends a lot on tribal knowledge. If you have a large staff turnover, then some of that in-house knowledge just disappears. And with our discovery, we provide that visibility, and you can use that information moving forward. So this really helped out. We work quite closely with the people responsible for the disaster recovery plans. We shared our dependency reports and allowed them to make the DR recovery plans a lot more efficient and effective. So just to recap on our process there, that our approach for Configure is we begin with the discovery and assessment period. We take that discovered data and we map it to applications and we view the dependencies. Based on those dependencies, we carve out the move groups and the move events. We execute the migration, starting with the earliest move first. Quite often it's the lowest risk. And we review those results in the target data center and compare them to what they were previously in the original data center. And we take all of our lessons learned throughout the entire duration of the migration to optimize disaster recovery efforts, and also just so people have a better understanding of how their environment works. So what we consider, what I certainly do consider, is one of the key factors for success was utilizing the UCMDB browser. So before we turned up, they all had their Excel spreadsheets going, and they were very comfortable using that application. But as soon as you downloaded that spreadsheet from the SharePoint, you're already working with stale data. When you try to upload it 2 or 3 hours later, somebody else has already uploaded another version in between, and you have these discrepancies in place between the different reports. So what we pushed the customer to do was to use the UCMDB browser as a central repository of all information regarding the data center migration. So a user could log in and can see the latest information regarding their servers, their applications, maybe their business unit as part of a move group. They can come in and see all of the latest information that's available to them, and they also can edit certain fields as well, so everybody's collaborating with one another all in one place. And from within the browser as well, you can load pre-generated reports. So we give visibility for key stakeholders and users who want to see the big picture of the migration. So at this point in time, I'm going to move over to our demo environment. I want to show you just some of the ways we use the UCMDB browser to assist with the migration. So for those that may not be aware of what the browser is, it acts as like a Google search interface to all of the discovered data that's stored within our CMDB. So once you log in, you have a simple search bar, and for this example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of our move events. So we're going to search for early move, and we find one result, which is our early move event. In the properties widgets, we have complete control of what we want to display. In this example, we're showing the scheduled move date for this move event. You can also see that there's 4 other objects or configuration items that are related to our selected object. So if we click on here, we can see the move groups that make up this early move event. So we have the 4 move groups here. And again, these are all just clickable. The interface is designed so it can be used with a touchscreen interface, so they're quite large buttons and objects that allows for simple navigation. So we just selected our Eagle move group. Again, the properties have changed slightly to reflect what we're currently looking at. So this is scheduled to move on September 4th, so the same as our move event, but it's highlighting that this is a production move group. And this move group is made up of these 5 individual business applications. So this will be based on our analysis. We've determined that these may share similar dependencies. So similar servers, they may have app-to-app dependencies as well. But we were able to effectively break these away from the rest of the pack and move them together as one package. So we've got these 5 business applications here. If we select the FlexNet application, we can view more information regarding this app. So this tells us here that it's made up of 1 Unix server and 3 Windows servers. And again, our properties widget up here has updated itself with different properties available. So we've got the move event it's a part of and the date, but we also have a app owner's notes. So this was an opportunity for the application owner to log into the browser and provide information to the migration team regarding his application. So he let us know that there's a high volume of data exchange between his application and the MS SQL 2008 database. So we would take this information and we would confirm that our application mapping efforts were accurate and that the server that he's specifying is related to our application. And we can see down here that the MS SQL 2008 server is in fact related to our app. So if we look at the properties of this configuration item, we can easily decide which of these properties here are editable by certain people. So they can log in and they can continue to collaborate with the migration team regarding information that they are the subject matter experts for. So one thing that we can also do with this information, he specified that this MS SQL 2008 database was integral to his application. So we can go and do a deep dive and look at this individual server itself. Now, many people on the call who are familiar with the UCMDB know the kind of information that is returned directly through discovery. So we see there's a SQL Server instance running on it, CPU information, file system information, processors information. All of this is coming automatically through universal discovery. And any changes that may happen to this, this server, we'll pick up on those changes and we'll update the relationships automatically. But from a migration standpoint, one of the key things we're going to look at for is what other applications are also using this server. And we can see here that there's 2 applications that are related to our SQL server. We have our FlexNet that we've just came from. We also see there's this eBill application as well. So if we take a look at this, we can see its relationships to other servers in the environments. We see our MS SQL 2008 database right there. But the one thing that we will note is looking at the properties, it's currently scheduled to move with a different move event. It's currently aligned with the non-stop move event and moving on November 19th. So what we would have to do is we'd have to talk to the application owner to understand its relationship between itself and this SQL database and determine whether this application can move at a separate time to this SQL database. If that is not at all possible, then what we would have to do is realign this application with a different move event or take the FlexNet application and move that to a different move event as well. So essentially we're making sure that both of those applications are always going to reside in the same data center as its database. So this browser acts as a great repository. Anybody can log in, do quick searches, see the latest information regarding their applications. But if we don't want to just do a search and look at one thing individually, we can actually load up reports from directly within the browser. So quite often we'll have project managers who just want to see the overall scope of the migration. And simple reports can be created such as our move event report here. which outlines all of the move events that we currently have scheduled. And then underneath we have the move groups that are part of that move event. And then we have the applications that are part of that move group. And then under that we get the servers that are part of that application. So this view, this report right here gives you the full scope of how every application is related to just one move group, and that move groups can be related to a move event. You'll also notice that we have control over the different attributes to include in the report, and some of the high-level attributes that are very useful from a migration standpoint is understanding the operating system that's running on a server and whether that server is virtual or not. So quite often before a migration occurs, you do a transformation of the existing data center, and you may want to bring all servers up to a standard operating environment. So you may set your own policy to say that the minimum server for Windows Server is Windows 2008 R2, and any other server that's below that version is violating that policy and would require an exception prior to it being migrated. The same can be said for the Unix or Linux environments, and sometimes you might want to move off the HPUX or the old Unix operating systems and move to Red Hat 6.4. We can provide all of that information directly to you through reports like this, or just direct reports that just say, show me all Windows 2003 servers. That can be generated, and then the operations team or the team responsible for the servers can work out their upgrade path to get to the standard operating environment. So if you're a business unit, and just you don't want to see the full picture of all the other move groups and move events, you can create template-based reports as well that involve a search parameter. So if you were part of the Eagle organization, you can come in and just search for your Eagle move group, and again, similar report format as what we saw before, but it's just narrowed down to include the information that is pertains to their own environment. So any of these reports that we're looking at right here can be scheduled to rerun. They can be scheduled to be emailed out to certain key personnel, and we can export them into the various file formats as well that's most appropriate for the end users. So the takeaway from the demo of the browser is really just trying to bring everybody together to work from one central database. And we've seen firsthand that the more different repositories of information that you have, the more likely it is for things to get missed. With everybody working from the same song sheet, it allows you to plan a more effective, efficient, and lower risk migration. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Anu, who's going to wrap up our presentation with some considerations and any potential questions that may have been asked from the group.
Thanks, Mark. You know, as you can all see from that demonstration, there's a lot of power within the CMS toolset. And when it's optimized, it really does have that ability to be the one-stop shop for managing the changes and the risks associated with a large initiative like a data center transformation. And if you've had any questions or have some requirements based on transformation events in your organization, or even questions around how to simply optimize your UCMDB, we encourage you to reach out to us. We found our data center transformation workshops to be a highly effective planning tool for a lot of the folks that we work with. This is typically a half-day session where our solution architects can meet with your team, understand the state of CMS in your organization, the gaps or requirements that you may have identified, and provide some guidance and best practices around those specific questions. And this is what you see highlighted on the slide here. And again, we strongly encourage you to reach out to us if this is something that's of interest to your team. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll take questions. I see quite a few questions have been posted in the board here. For anyone who has questions who hasn't posted them yet, now would be a great time to do so. So Mark, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
The first question that we've got for you is a use case driven question. So how would the UCMDB handle this particular use case? Servers are mapped to applications, and when they move from one site to another, their host names will get changed, and so will their IP addresses. Will the UCMDB automatically pick this up?
That's a good question. So we have reconciliation rules in place and that look for certain aspects of the server, whether it could be the IP address, MAC address, host name, and those can be updated and edited to reflect the certain changes that are in place. So if those changes do exist, we can work with them. Another important aspect is we went through the application mapping process. A lot of our applications are built off fingerprints of the application. So we don't really drill off the host name or the IP address. We look for something like a unique piece of software running on that server. So a simple example would be our UCMDB server. And when we moved from one data center to another, we did get a different host name. But our application maps were looking for any server that was running the UCMDB_server.exe executable. And if it found a new server that was running that, it said, hey, there's a new server that's come online that fits our profile for our application, and it adds that server to our application map.
Okay, awesome. Great answer. The next question that we see here is you showed the potential to edit data. Is that editing tracked, and can it be controlled?
Yeah, it's a common question that we get from customers. They can be quite apprehensive about allowing people free rein over editing all kinds of data. And fortunately, we do have control over which users are allowed to edit the data and also which fields can be edited. So we have complete control over who can do those actions. And not only that is we track the changes that occur on any of the configuration items. So whether that's an application, a move event, a server, a database, if any of those attributes are changed, what we do is we store the old value, the new value, the timestamp of when that change occurred, and the user that made that change. So we have a full audit trail of any changes that may have happened, and we can roll back to what previous changes were.
Okay, and Mark, a sub-question to that follow-up, rather, is that out-of-the-box functionality, or is that something custom?
It's all out of the box. Everything we've done today has been using out-of-the-box functionality, just using different tick boxes and controls, using the roles and profiles that's available within the tool.
Okay, perfect. The next question here is, looks like you demoed custom CI types and attributes. Does this impact day-to-day use of UCMDB and existing integration?
Okay, good question and a good eye. We certainly made some modifications to the class model. We created some custom CI types based around move groups and move events. And we also created some custom attributes on some of the out-of-the-box CI types as well. And people can be a little bit apprehensive about making modifications to their class model. I know in previous versions of UCMDB, if you try to move from, say, version 8 to version 9 or version 9 to version 10, if you had a lot of customized data, it could make the upgrade a little bit more difficult. However, the majority of the projects we've done regarding data center transformations, we've gone in and stood up a brand new instance of the UCMDB. So we've started from scratch with discovery and from our central database. If you happen to have a more mature environment and you didn't feel comfortable about making modifications to your class model, you could stand up a new application server and database, and you can just push over the discovered data from your primary CMDB over to your data center CMDB and make the modifications to the class model on this new application server. So there's a number of options to you available if you don't feel comfortable, or if you do feel comfortable modifying the class model.
Okay, awesome. I think that's a really important point. And the final question that we've got here, Can the same UCMDB database discover the existing data center and the new target data center?
Okay. So yeah, I may have touched on this slightly during the presentation. And just a quick high-level architecture for those who may not be familiar with the UCMDB. The application itself has its own database, but we also have what we call data flow probes. These are like little satellites that are installed on a separate server on different segments of the network. There can be different segments, and it can also be different data centers. So in our example, with our use case, we had, I think it was 8 data flow probes in our primary data center. And then when the new data center broke ground and was ready to support infrastructure, we installed a new virtual machine out there and put our software on it. And it was discovering across the entire network in that new data center. And as soon as a new server came online, we would identify it, discover it, and send that information back to our application server that resided in the old data center. So yes, you can absolutely discover more than one data center with one application server.
Okay, great. Mark, thank you so much for covering those answers, and thanks to all of the attendees for taking the time out for today's call. We hope that you enjoyed our session and found it to be informative. Once again, please do not hesitate to reach out to either myself or Mark if you have any questions, or if you just want to review what was discussed today. You can see our contact information listed on the screen here. So thanks everyone for your time and your attention. Have a great afternoon, and if you do have a few minutes, or a minute rather, please take a moment to do the survey that comes up following the webinar. Thanks so much, and have a great day.